Thomas Granger could still remember the scent of dust and sand as vividly as if it clung to his skin. That sharp, dry smell had followed him from war-torn deserts in the Middle East all the way to his front porch in Virginia, haunting his senses long after he'd packed away his uniform for good. For 25 years, he served in the United States Marine Corps, a stretch of time that shaped not only his profession but defined who he was at the core. But despite all the gunfire and chaos he had endured overseas, the fiercest battles he would ever face were waged under his own roof. These days, he lived just outside Richmond, Virginia, in a well-kept two-story house with a classic wraparound porch. It wasn't extravagant, nor was it plain. It was simply where his life had settled. Thomas had tied the knot when he was barely out of high school. Monica, the girl he married, had once been a local beauty queen with honey blonde hair and a smile that used to light up rooms. Back then, she had seemed like everything he could ever want. He used to believe she'd always be there for him, his rock, his constant. During his deployments, which stretched on for months, Monica stayed behind, running the household, finishing her degree, and later raising their son, Lucas. But over time, her support felt more like obligation than love. At 52, Thomas's face bore the marks of years spent under desert suns and winds that had carved deep lines into his skin. His once dark hair was now streaked with steel gray and white, especially at the temples. His build remained broad, his frame strong. He still carried himself like the Marine he'd always been, hyper-aware of everything around him. Friends would often joke that he never really left the Corps behind, and he'd grin, replying with that old mantra, "Once a Marine, always a Marine." Most people found it charming. Monica, however, acted like it grated on her nerves. On a brisk October morning, Thomas stood at the end of his driveway, coffee in hand, watching the neighborhood trees turn brilliant shades of crimson and gold. Leaves floated down, collecting in whispering piles on the sidewalk. He breathed in deeply, savoring the peace. A quiet cul-de-sac, a couple of dog walkers strolling past, and the faint sound of a lawnmower humming in the distance. These simple suburban scenes were what he'd fought to protect for years. He set his mug down, climbed into his SUV, and headed out to his company, Granger Security Consulting. He'd started the business after retiring from active duty, putting his deep knowledge of threat assessment and tactical planning to use for corporate clients. The job was no cakewalk, but it let him sleep in his own bed each night, something he used to fantasize about during long, sleepless stints overseas. The office was housed in a basic two-story building with dark-tinted windows, part of a larger office park near the city. Inside, the walls were covered with framed snapshots from his military days, images of him and fellow Marines posed near sandbag bunkers, some grinning, some scowling, all of them worn and gritty. One frame showed him being handed the Silver Star, another displayed his Purple Heart. He didn't like to bring those up. In his mind, no ribbon or decoration could truly represent what those years had taken from him, or the friends who never made it home. "Morning, boss," came the cheerful voice of Nina, his office manager. She was a petite woman with a sharp mind, tight curls, and a flair for bold lipstick. "I've got a fresh pot of coffee on," she added. Thomas offered her a grateful nod. "Can't turn that down. We still on for that call with Sterling Insurance at 10. Nina nodded crisply. "Yes, sir. Their CFO is eager to wrap things up." "Oh, and Derek Lawson called earlier. Left a message." Thomas paused mid-step. "Derek called here?" "Didn't say much, just asked you to call him back," she replied. His expression softened a little. "Thanks, Nina. I'll give him a ring later." He retreated into his office, a no-frills space with a solid wooden desk and a single potted plant Monica had brought in, insisting the room needed some life. He sat down and, for a moment, let his thoughts wander to Derek Lawson. Derek was more than just an old friend. He was practically family. They'd enlisted in the Marines together at 19, survived boot camp side by side, and even found themselves deployed to the same combat zone once. Derek had left the service after 5 years, deciding the rigid discipline wasn't for him. Still, they stayed close, their bond forged in fire. Thomas had always thought of Derek as the brother fate had given him. He made a mental note to call him back before lunch, then dove into work, skimming over contracts, reviewing project proposals, responding to a backlog of urgent emails. When he finally glanced up, it was already noon. He picked up his phone and dialed the number from memory. "Thomas," came Derek's familiar, smooth voice. "I was beginning to think you were dodging me." Thomas chuckled. "You know me. If I didn't want to talk, you wouldn't be hearing from me at all." They bantered for a bit before Derek suggested grabbing a late lunch. Thomas checked his schedule, found a gap, and agreed. Soon, he was back in his SUV, weaving through midday traffic toward their usual steakhouse on the west side of town. Derek was easy to spot, tall, with broad shoulders and slicked-back salt and pepper hair. He wore a navy suit so sharp it looked like it came with its own stock portfolio, his shoes polished to a mirror finish. By contrast, Thomas's slacks and polo shirt gave off a more laid-back vibe, but he didn't mind. They exchanged a quick hug and slid into a booth tucked away from the crowd. Derek ordered sparkling water, claiming he was cleaning up his habits. Thomas went with his go-to, iced tea. Their conversation flowed naturally, from shared marine stories to Derek's booming real estate ventures. After leaving the military, Derek had made millions flipping homes and investing in commercial properties. Thomas admired his friend's success but never envied it. He was content running his consultancy. Derek teased him about being too humble, but Thomas just shrugged it off. Toward the end of the meal, they switched to personal updates. Thomas mentioned that Lucas was halfway through his second year at community college, saving money by living at home, something Monica complained about constantly, though Thomas didn't bring that up. Derek gave an update on Ethan, his own son, who was also attending community college. The two boys were best friends, which always amused Thomas. Derek said he was proud of Ethan, but admitted he sometimes worried the kid had a bit too much of a reckless streak. Thomas gave a knowing nod, recalling the stories Lucas often shared about Ethan's over-the-top parties and impulsive antics. Just before they parted ways, Derek rested a hand on Thomas's shoulder. "I've been meaning to swing by your place," he said casually. "Feels like it's been forever since I saw Monica. Thought maybe we could fire up the grill this weekend, catch a game, reminisce a bit." Thomas returned the gesture with a warm grin. "Monica'll be into that, I'm sure. How about Saturday afternoon? Bring Ethan along if he's not buried in homework." Derek nodded. "Free food? He'll crawl there if he has to, especially if it's your famous steaks." Thomas laughed, sealing the plan with a handshake. On the drive back to the office, he found himself smiling without even realizing it. For that brief moment, life felt right. Despite the emotional baggage he carried from years in combat zones, Thomas had what many longed for: a steady home life, a thriving business, and a lifelong friend who still showed up. What he didn't know was that Derek already had an entirely different meeting in mind, one that Thomas, had he known, would have shut down without hesitation. By the time Thomas pulled into the driveway later that afternoon, the sun was dipping low, streaking the sky with soft oranges and streaks of fading pink. Monica's car was already parked in its usual spot. When he stepped inside, the rich aroma of garlic and butter welcomed him. Monica stood in the kitchen wearing a flowery apron, methodically stirring a pot of sauce. Even at 50, she still had the polished appearance of a former beauty queen, her golden blonde hair impeccably styled, her figure the result of obsessive gym hours. She tossed a glance over her shoulder and gave him a smile that looked just warm enough to pass for genuine. "Hungry?" she asked, holding up a wooden spoon. "I made fettuccine alfredo with roasted veggies." Thomas inhaled deeply. "Smells incredible. You're spoiling me again." He stepped up behind her, gently resting his hands on her hips and pressing a soft kiss to her cheek. She stiffened, but only for a split second, before leaning back slightly into the gesture. Thomas didn't catch the pause. He chalked it up to being startled. "How was your day?" she asked, keeping her eyes on the stovetop. "Busy, but good. Had lunch with Derek. He's coming by Saturday, wants to grill, maybe catch the game." "Sounds nice," Monica replied, her voice smooth as she flicked off the burner. "It's been a while." "Yeah, he said some big real estate deals had him swamped, but he's clearing time now." They sat down for dinner in the modest dining room. Nothing fancy, just their usual dishes, cloth napkins, and a half-empty bottle of white wine that Monica had opened earlier. She poured Thomas a glass, but he only took a few sips. "How's Lucas doing?" he asked, twirling his fork into the pasta. Monica shrugged. "He's upstairs. Studying. Or gaming. Or whatever he does." Thomas chuckled. "He's a solid kid. Maybe we should ask him to join us." "He's old enough to make his own decisions," Monica replied curtly, waving a dismissive hand. "Let him be." They drifted into talk about yard work, the leaves piling up, the fence needing paint. Monica mentioned a new yoga class she was trying out. On the surface, the conversation felt normal, routine, comfortable even. But when Thomas casually said how much he appreciated having her around now that he was no longer being shipped overseas, her eyes flickered with something she quickly buried by pivoting to the idea of a winter trip to Florida. After dinner, Thomas loaded the dishwasher while Monica wiped the counters with practiced efficiency. To anyone watching, they would have looked like a picture-perfect suburban couple, dividing the chores before easing into the evening. But had Thomas been just a little more observant, he might have noticed how often Monica checked her phone, how she swiftly dismissed notifications anytime he glanced her way. The truth was, she was waiting on a message from Derek. She had been for years. What Thomas didn't know, what no one knew, was that Monica had been guarding a secret for nearly 2 decades. A secret that, if exposed, would dismantle every truth Thomas believed about his marriage. Yet she played her role flawlessly, so flawlessly that even a man trained to detect threats missed all the signs. Upstairs, Lucas Granger sat in his bedroom, hunched over his desk, textbook open beside him. But he wasn't just studying. He was texting Ethan, trading memes, and making tentative plans for the weekend. At 20, Lucas resembled his father in ways both physical and subtle, tall, broad-chested, with that serious edge that made people instinctively treat him like he was older. Above his desk, he'd pinned a photo of Thomas in uniform, proud and resolute. Next to it was a picture of him and Ethan from their high school graduation, arms slung around each other, both grinning like kids who believed the world owed them something. Lucas admired his dad deeply. Every so often, he thought about enlisting, following in Thomas's footsteps. But Monica shot that idea down fast, reminding him coldly that she'd already sacrificed enough nights alone. So, Lucas chose community college instead, majoring in business. It was cheaper, and living at home helped keep the bills low. He heard the quiet clink of dishes downstairs as dinner wrapped up and felt nothing out of the ordinary. In fact, if you asked him, he would have said things at home were calm, maybe even boring. He had no way of knowing how close that calm was to breaking. Saturday rolled around quicker than expected, and with it came Derek, who pulled up in a gleaming black SUV, looking every bit the polished businessman. Dressed in designer jeans and a crisp polo shirt, he stepped out grinning as Thomas manned the grill in the driveway. The fall air smelled of sizzling beef, fresh-cut grass, and Monica's subtle but unmistakable perfume. "Where's that son of yours?" Thomas asked as they shook hands. "Ethan's buried in a class project," Derek replied with a shrug. "Said he might swing by later." They wandered into the backyard where Monica had already arranged a small setup, condiments, buns, drinks in a cooler. She emerged from the patio door wearing oversized sunglasses and a relaxed smile, the picture of effortless charm. Derek lifted a hand in greeting. Neither Thomas nor Monica acknowledged the flicker in Derek's eyes the moment he saw her. Lucas was outside too, lounging near the porch rail, soda can in hand, occasionally glancing at his phone. He and Derek chatted about college for a bit while Thomas worked the grill with military precision, adding cheese, flipping patties, keeping everything under control. Monica lingered near the table, setting down a bowl of coleslaw and offering to top off drinks with the kind of hospitality that looked natural, almost too natural. Monica appeared calm and comfortable, and Thomas felt a quiet satisfaction watching his family and best friend enjoy the afternoon together. Lucas, always thinking ahead, looked over at Derek. "Do you have any internships at your company? I'm trying to build up some real-world experience." Derek chuckled. "Possibly, but it's real estate. You'd mostly be filing documents or dealing with tenants. Not exactly thrilling stuff." Lucas grinned. "Still better than fast food." The conversation flowed easily. The burgers sizzled, the drinks were cold, and the backyard gathering had the effortless charm of a family commercial. Thomas told a few Marine Corps stories, some amusing, some intense, earning genuine laughter from Derek. Monica added brief memories of Thomas's letters from overseas. But behind the polite smiles and shared history, Monica and Derek continued a silent conversation with their eyes, a pattern formed long ago. In those fleeting glances were years of secrets, the residue of hotel rooms, and stolen hours when Thomas was away. It was a coded language born from habit and hidden desire. Thomas noticed none of it. When the game started, he and Derek went inside to watch while Monica stayed in the kitchen. Lucas headed upstairs, video chatting with a friend. As the living room filled with the distant roar of the crowd, Monica casually excused herself, claiming she was getting dessert, even though none had been made. What she really wanted was a private word with Derek. She found him alone in the hallway, scrolling through his phone. He looked up and gave her a smile that made her pulse jump. "Was hoping I'd catch you," he said. Her voice dropped. We've got to be careful. Thomas is right there. Derek nodded slightly, never breaking eye contact. I know. Relax. There was a familiar tension in the air, electric, charged, and complicated. Over the years, every time Thomas deployed, Derek had been the one to check in, offer support, and eventually share her bed. Monica had once convinced herself it was Thomas's absence that led her to Derek. But now that Thomas was home, the excuse felt thin. I'll text you, she whispered. I'll say I'm visiting a friend next week. Derek gave a knowing smirk. I'll book the usual spot. The sound of the TV announcer calling a timeout made her flinch. Go. I'll be there in a second. He slipped away, and Monica grabbed a carton of ice cream from the freezer, scooping it quickly into bowls with trembling hands, hoping her flustered expression wouldn't give her away. That night, after Derek left and Lucas retreated to his room, Thomas and Monica sat on the couch. She leaned against him, letting his arm fall around her shoulders. He smelled of grilled meat and familiar aftershave. It was oddly comforting. As Thomas flipped to a random reality show, he reached for a photo album Monica had left out. He paused at a picture from their wedding, Thomas in uniform, Monica in a lace dress, both smiling wide and unguarded. He glanced at her. You all right? She forced a gentle smile. Just remembering. That was a good day. He kissed her temple. I'm sorry I was gone so much. If I could do it again, I'd try to be stationed closer to home. She rested her head on him, her throat tight. You did what you had to do. You served the country. That part was true. But as she sat there in Thomas's embrace, her mind wandered to Derek again. She wondered whether she'd ever really been as lonely as she claimed, or if she'd simply made herself believe it to excuse her betrayal. A few days later, Monica told Thomas she was going to Charlottesville to visit an old friend. He nodded without question. Lucas, busy with assignments, barely noticed. By Friday morning, she packed a small bag, put on a fitted cardigan and jeans, and headed out. Thomas had left early for a client meeting, which made her exit easier. She was relieved not to face his calm, steady gaze. Her first stop was a highway gas station, where she topped off her tank and texted Derek. He sent her the address of a quiet boutique hotel near Williamsburg, far enough to avoid anyone who might recognize them. She checked in around noon, then sat on the bed, flipping through channels without watching. Her nerves buzzed with anticipation and guilt. When Derek arrived, dressed in a crisp shirt and wearing his usual self-assured smile, she stood to greet him. He shut the door, locked it, and dropped his bag. They didn't speak at first. Instead, Monica stepped forward, letting herself be drawn into his arms. The kiss that followed was urgent, full of the intensity they always seemed to summon in these fleeting reunions. They weren't young anymore, both in their 50s, but in moments like this, they felt pulled back into something reckless and familiar. Later, as they lay side by side in the quiet, Monica stared at the ceiling, the guilt creeping back in like a rising tide. We can't keep doing this, she whispered. Derek turned to face her, resting his head on one hand. You've said that before. Yet here we are. Thomas is home now. Every night. He's making an effort. I can't keep lying. Derek traced a finger lightly along her shoulder. If he really was the man everyone thinks he is, you wouldn't need me. Monica frowned. That's not fair. Thomas is a good man. Her voice cracked just slightly. Because deep down, she knew that part was true, even if she'd spent years ignoring what that meant. So am I, Derek murmured. Monica exhaled slowly. No, you're not. You're just good at pretending. He smirked, pulling her closer until his breath brushed her cheek. They said nothing more, slipping into the familiar silence of indulgence. Monica pushed aside guilt and dread, focusing instead on the high she got from Derek's desire. She never expected these secret rendezvous to spiral until temptation found her in a new, riskier form. Monica had always taken her gym routine seriously. 3 to 4 classes a week, sessions with personal trainers. Her commitment wasn't just about health, but about holding on to the version of herself she still wanted to believe existed. Lately, she'd noticed younger men glancing her way more often. It flattered her, even if she pretended not to care. She wore tasteful workout gear, form-fitting leggings, fitted tops, but there was no denying the thrill she felt under those lingering stares. She made small talk with a few trainers, but one stood out, Tyrell. Young, sculpted, and charming, he flirted subtly. Monica kept things light. She was already cheating on Thomas with Derek. She drew her moral line there. Or so she thought. Then one Friday night, at a local bar for a friend's birthday, that line blurred. She'd planned to stay for just a drink, maybe 2. But near the bar, she ran into someone unexpected, Ethan Lawson, Derek's son. He was laughing with a loud group of college kids. It took him a moment to recognize her. "Mrs. Granger," he said, blinking under the neon glow. "Well, didn't expect to see you here." Monica smiled, swirling her wine glass. "Just out celebrating a friend. What about you?" "Friend's 21st, he said, pointing toward his group. "They're going a little hard. I'm trying to keep it together." He looked her over, not lewd, but curious. "You look different outside the house." Her stomach fluttered, not attraction, exactly. More like being noticed in a way she hadn't felt in years. "Well, good to see you, Ethan. How's school?" "Same old," he shrugged. "And please, just call me Ethan. Mrs. Granger feels like I should be turning in homework." She chuckled. "Sure, Ethan." He glanced at his watch. "I'd better rejoin the chaos before they think I ghosted. Maybe we'll catch up sometime." "Maybe," she said, surprised by her own uncertainty. "Take care." As he walked away, Monica tried to convince herself it had been nothing, just an innocent conversation. But something about his gaze stayed with her. It reminded her of how men used to look at her during her pageant days, back when she felt powerful. She brushed the thought aside. Still, over the next few weeks, she kept running into Ethan. At the grocery store. At the mall. Twice at Lucas's college, when she picked him up from evening classes. Each time, Ethan greeted her with a warm, almost eager friendliness. At first, she found it awkward, then oddly exciting. She told herself it was harmless, that she was just lonely, bored, confused. But the more it happened, the more her thoughts tangled. Then one night, he showed up at the house. Lucas was out with friends, and Thomas was in D.C. on an overnight client trip. Monica had just poured herself a glass of wine and queued up a movie when the doorbell rang. Ethan stood there, hands jammed into his hoodie pocket, looking unsure of himself. "Hey, is Lucas here?" "No," she said, stepping aside. "He's out. Won't be back for a while. Want to come in?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, sure. We were supposed to meet up." She offered him a drink, just water or soda, then returned to the couch. Ethan stayed near the TV, eyes drifting over the living room. His gaze landed on framed photos. Thomas and Monica's wedding, baby pictures of Lucas, Monica with her old pageant sashes. He let out a soft laugh. "You were Miss Bayfield County, right? My dad mentioned that once." Monica felt herself blush. "Yes. Ages ago. You still look like a pageant queen," Ethan said, fumbling the words. "I mean, beautiful." She smiled tightly. "Thanks, Ethan. That's kind of you." He shifted awkwardly. "Guess I'll just wait in Lucas's room?" "Sure. Go ahead." As he disappeared down the hall, she released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Something about his energy unsettled her. It wasn't quite threatening, just charged. Different from Derek's confident touch or Tyrell's playful charm. It stirred something deeper, something more dangerous. She told herself to stop being ridiculous. This was Ethan, Derek's son, Lucas's best friend. It was absurd. Thankfully, Lucas came home about 30 minutes later, his voice echoing upstairs. Monica felt the tension lift, but it didn't quite vanish. Time passed. Her secret life continued, though her visits with Derek became less frequent. Not because she'd found clarity, but because something inside her had shifted. Her thoughts wandered more and more to Ethan. The idea of him. The risk. The thrill. She hated herself for it. He was half her age. A boy. But the very wrongness of it drew her in. A dark curiosity she couldn't fully smother. Then one night, after 2 glasses of wine, she walked into the living room and found Ethan sitting alone on the couch, waiting for Lucas. It was nearly 10. Lucas was running late from a study group. Thomas was gone overnight again. Monica, fresh from a shower, had thrown on a thin robe and hadn't expected company. She sat beside him casually, trying not to seem surprised. "So, how's school going?" They chatted, class schedules, plans for the summer, vague mentions of girlfriends. Ethan was polite but distracted. His eyes kept flicking to the edge of her robe, the curve of her leg where skin met fabric. Monica pretended not to notice. But she did. And worse, she didn't hate it. Monica noticed his lingering gaze. She offered a coy smile and swirled her wine, the edge of her robe falling slightly open. "You must have girls chasing you left and right," she said teasingly. Ethan gave a nervous chuckle. "Maybe a few. But honestly, most of them just want attention. Not all of them are worth the trouble." "Really?" she replied, intrigued. He met her eyes. "Sometimes, the people you shouldn't want are the ones you think about most." Her hand trembled, and a thin stream of wine spilled onto the couch cushion. She set the glass down quickly, trying to cover her unease with a laugh. Sounds like something a 20-year-old would say, full of confidence and chaos. He shifted closer, voice softer now. I'm not the only one who likes a little chaos. The air between them thickened. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She could walk away, say something light, shrug it off, but she didn't. She couldn't. Not after everything. Memories of Derek flashed through her mind. She had told herself that first time with him was a mistake, a moment of weakness. But it turned into years. And now? Now this. This was a whole new depth of betrayal. Ethan reached out, his fingertips brushing against the sensitive skin of her arm. Monica inhaled sharply but didn't move away. Something cracked inside her. Loneliness, vanity, maybe the thrill of feeling wanted again. She leaned in. He met her halfway. Their kiss was hesitant at first, exploratory. Then it grew more urgent, more reckless. It didn't matter that they were sitting on the same couch she had shared with Thomas for decades. It didn't matter that Lucas could walk in at any moment. Nothing mattered but the heat of the moment. They fumbled with clothing, whispers mixing with laughter and tension. Her heart raced with shame and anticipation. And still, she didn't stop. Afterward, they dressed in silence. Monica caught her reflection in the dark TV screen and barely recognized the woman staring back. She tidied her hair, not speaking. Ethan stood nearby, chest rising and falling. His eyes were wide, stunned, exhilarated, maybe even proud. She looked at him, her tone flat and cold. This never happened. I know, he muttered. I won't say anything. But she saw something behind his eyes, uncertainty, possessiveness, a flicker of something that didn't sit right. That night, Monica lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. She barely blinked. She imagined Thomas's reaction if he ever found out. She thought of Derek, how betrayed he'd feel if he discovered she had slept with his son. The weight of it all pressed down on her chest. And yet, beneath the fear, there was a rush. A reckless, shameful exhilaration that curled like smoke in her stomach. Days turned to weeks. Ethan kept his distance, but he still sent the occasional text. Nothing explicit, just cryptic references and inside jokes that made her skin crawl. She ignored them, or tried to. Derek, meanwhile, grew frustrated. Monica wasn't as responsive. She canceled their meetings. When she did respond, her replies were curt, her warmth gone. He thought she was feeling guilt about Thomas. He had no idea she was already addicted to something far more dangerous. He tried everything: flowers, jewelry, sweet voicemails. Monica responded with hollow thank yous and vague excuses. Her mind was elsewhere, tangled in a storm of secrets. Lucas remained blissfully unaware, caught up in school and work. He noticed Ethan acting strangely, more distracted, more withdrawn, but chalked it up to exam stress. What else could it be? Then, everything crashed down. Lucas was at Ethan's apartment, casually gaming like they had dozens of times before. Ethan stepped out to take a call. His laptop sat open on the desk. A ping from a file-sharing app appeared on the screen. Lucas glanced over. The folder name alone was odd. He hesitated. Then curiosity got the better of him. He clicked. The video opened. At first, he didn't register what he was seeing. Then, slowly, horror dawned. It was the living room. His living room. The couch. The familiar lamp. The seascape painting. And in the middle of it all, his mother. Entwined with Ethan. He couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. His stomach twisted. His hands shook. He slammed the laptop shut just as Ethan walked back in. What were you looking at? Ethan asked, brow furrowing at Lucas's ghost-white face. Lucas stood up so fast, the chair clattered to the floor. What the hell is that? Ethan's eyes darted to the laptop. Realization hit. He raised his hands. Mike, listen. I didn't mean for it. Lucas lunged, grabbing Ethan by the collar and slamming him into the wall. That's my mom. You sick? He couldn't even finish the sentence. The rage strangled his words. Ethan pushed him away, and they grappled violently. Lucas landed a punch that sent Ethan stumbling. Ethan came back with a knee to his ribs. Lucas winced, but fury drove him forward. He grabbed the laptop and bolted for the door, ignoring Ethan's shouting. The night outside was soaked in rain. He sprinted to his car, face what with tears and storm water. He barely saw the road on the drive home, blinded by betrayal, rage, disbelief. When he got to the house, drenched and trembling, Monica was in the living room, folding laundry. The TV murmured in the background. She looked up, startled. "Lucas? You're soaked? What happened?" He didn't answer. He raced past her, up the stairs, slamming his bedroom door behind him. Monica stood frozen, the color draining from her face. There was something in his expression she'd never seen before. Something terrifying. She thought about knocking, but she didn't. Upstairs, Lucas gripped the laptop like it might explode. He paced in circles, teeth clenched, thoughts racing. He wanted to scream, wanted to confront her, shatter everything in a single blow. But beneath the rage, a deep shame festered, a grief so personal it made his skin crawl. How could he even speak about that video? Lucas felt sick to his core. His stomach churned, his chest tight. All he wanted in that moment was his dad, Thomas, the one steady figure in his world, the man who always knew what to do. But Thomas was still out, expected back later that evening. A storm of emotion thrashed inside him: fury, shame, disbelief. He stared at the backpack where the laptop sat, the proof of his world unraveling. Part of him wanted to storm downstairs, throw the laptop on the table, and scream at Monica until she had no choice but to admit it. But another part of him couldn't bear to see her face. He sat at the edge of his bed, fist clenched, eyes burning with unshed tears. Downstairs, Monica lingered. She tried to distract herself with TV, scrolled through her phone, folded towels, rearranged the silverware drawer, anything to stay busy. But her thoughts kept drifting back to Lucas's face when he ran and soaked and silent. Eventually, she gave up. She turned off the lights and went to bed, brushing it off as some college drama she assumed he'd eventually get over. She had no idea that the secret she feared most, more than Thomas ever finding out, more than Derek ever confronting her, had been exposed to her own son. Thomas returned around 11 p.m., his shoulders heavy with exhaustion after a long drive in the rain. Monica greeted him with forced normalcy and mentioned that Lucas had come home upset. Thomas didn't think much of it: college stress, maybe something with a friend. Still, he climbed the stairs and knocked on Lucas's door. "Hey, kiddo. You all right?" A tense pause, then, "Go away." Thomas frowned. "Okay. I won't push. We'll talk in the morning. Whatever's going on, we'll work it out." Silence. Lucas didn't sleep. Not for a second. He sat in the dark, back against his wall, eyes fixed on the laptop like it might leap out and attack him. His mind spun in painful loops: his mother, the betrayal, Ethan's face. His best friend, his mother. By morning, his head throbbed. His eyes were swollen from crying and his muscles ached from the stress. Light crept through the blinds, casting stripes across the floor. He picked up his phone, intending to call someone. He didn't know who, when he noticed a new text notification. His thumb hesitated before opening it. "Mike, please. Meet me at the lake near campus. 10 a.m. I need to show you something. You'll understand. Please come alone. Ethan." He read it 3 times, then a 4th. The lake, their lake, was an old haunt. They used to fish there, build campfires, talk about girls and careers and everything they thought they understood about life. Now, it felt like the ghost of something already dead. Still, Lucas needed answers. He couldn't scream into silence any longer. Against his better judgment, he shoved the laptop into his backpack, laced his boots, and crept out of the house, avoiding the kitchen where Monica might be. If he saw her, he wasn't sure he could keep from exploding. The sky was gray, the wind bitter. He zipped his hoodie up to his chin and drove through mist and fog, heart pounding with dread. He arrived at the lake early, parked, waited. 10 minutes passed, then 15. No sign of Ethan. The wind off the water was biting, slicing through his jacket. At 10:20, he heard an engine rumbling behind him. A black sedan pulled into the lot. Not Ethan's car. He tensed. Then, out of nowhere, a van screeched around the sedan and stopped in front of him. The side door flew open. Panic bloomed in his chest. 2 men jumped out, dressed in dark clothing. No words, just action. Lucas dropped the backpack and staggered backward. "Hey, what the?" One man grabbed his hoodie and yanked him forward. Another looped an arm around his neck. He struggled wildly, gasping. Then blackness. A cloth bag slammed over his head. He screamed, but the sound was cut short by a fist to the gut. Air left his lungs in one painful whoosh. Cold metal snapped around his wrists. "Let me go," he choked. No one answered. They threw him into the van, face down. The floor was hard. The smell, damp, dirty canvas, burned his nose. Zip ties cinched his ankles. He writhed, fighting against the cuffs, but they bit deeper into his skin. "Drive," one man barked. The engine roared, and the van jolted forward. Lucas's heart felt like it might explode. Every breath was a rasp through fabric. The bag over his face was suffocating. The van bounced violently down rough roads. The shocks rattled through his bones. He heard murmurs, low male voices, none of it made sense. His mind swirled. Why? Was it the video? The laptop? Was this Ethan? Derek? Hours seemed to pass in the dark. At one point, someone yanked him upright and shoved him into a corner, holding him steady as the van continued to jolt and rattle. He tried to steel himself. Is this it? Is this where I die? Finally, the van slowed. Gravel crunched beneath tires. The engine cut off. Doors slid open. Hands grabbed him, rough and unkind. Move. He kicked blindly, hitting someone's shin. Quit struggling, kid, someone snarled, shoving him hard enough that he nearly fell. They dragged him across uneven ground. He felt sticks snap beneath his shoes, what leaves clinging to his jeans. Pine filled his nose. Somewhere nearby, a door creaked open. He was shoved forward. The cloth bag was yanked off. He blinked rapidly, disoriented by a harsh bulb hanging from the ceiling. His vision cleared slowly. He was inside a cabin, bare walls, wooden floor, cold air slithering through cracks in the timber. He was alone with them now. And whoever had orchestrated this wasn't just trying to scare him. The cabin was cold and silent, its walls nothing more than rough planks, the floor a patchwork of worn wooden boards. In front of Lucas stood Derek Lawson, expression unreadable. And behind him, Ethan. Lucas's stomach turned with a violent jolt of rage. He tried to lunge toward Ethan, but the cuffs on his wrists held tight. A man behind him clamped a hand on his shoulder and forced him to his knees. Ethan looked like he wanted to vanish. His eyes darted away, guilt etched in every line of his face. But Derek? Derek was a statue, stoic, calculated, a pistol tucked into his waistband. Don't do anything stupid, Derek said, stepping forward. Lucas glared up at him, breathing hard. This is kidnapping. Are you out of your damn mind? Derek's voice was cold steel. We had to get you somewhere private. We know you took the video from Ethan's laptop. Lucas spat on the floor. You're insane. Derek's nostrils flared. Where's the laptop? Go to hell. Ethan shifted on his feet. Dad, maybe we should just talk to him, Al. Shut up, Derek snapped. Your little mistake is why we're in this mess. Lucas seethed. My dad's going to find me. And when he does, you'll regret touching me. Before he could finish, Derek stepped in and slammed the butt of his pistol into Lucas's ribs. The pain detonated through him. He folded forward, coughing, struggling for air. Dad! Ethan shouted, eyes wide with horror. Stop. Derek didn't even look at his son. He crouched beside Lucas, fury etched into every feature. Where's the laptop? And any copies of that video? You're going to delete it. Now. Lucas wheezed, trying to catch his breath. I'd rather die. Derek's hand tightened around the pistol grip. For a moment, Lucas believed he might actually pull the trigger. But then footsteps. The cabin door creaked open. All heads turned. Monica Granger stood in the doorway, breathless and pale. She wore hastily thrown on jeans and a loose sweater. Her hair was messy, like she'd left the house in a panic. Oh my God, she breathed. She stared at her son, on the floor, cuffed. At Derek, with the gun. At Ethan, shaking in the corner. What the hell is going on? Derek didn't lower the gun. I told you to come alone. Monica stepped forward, her eyes locked on Lucas. You kidnapped him? Her voice cracked. Derek, how could you? Lucas lifted his head, his voice cutting. Are you in on this too? No, Monica said quickly. Derek said something about talking to you, making sure you didn't share the video. I didn't think he'd do this. She turned to Ethan. How could you let this happen? I didn't want this, Ethan said, hugging himself. This is Dad's idea. Monica spun on Derek, her voice trembling with fury. If Thomas finds out you abducted his son, he'll kill you. Let him go. Now. Derek didn't flinch. Not until we get the laptop. He tells us where it is, and we walk away. You're insane, Monica hissed. This is criminal. You'll go to prison. Derek wiped sweat from his brow. Don't act like your hands are clean, Monica. You lit this match. You were the one sneaking around while Thomas was off saving the world. And then you couldn't resist jumping into bed with Ethan, your son's best friend. You think this was never going to explode? Lucas's stomach turned. His skin burned with humiliation. Monica's eyes brimmed with tears. Don't you dare blame me for kidnapping my son. This is your madness. Ethan raised his hands helplessly. Mom. I'm sorry. I know it's messed up. Lucas cut him off. Don't call her Mom. You're the bastard who slept with her. Ethan flinched like he'd been struck. Derek turned back to Monica. Stop acting like the victim. You came here to get Lucas to delete the video. So do it. Unless you'd rather let Thomas find out. Let the world see. You think your reputation will survive? Monica pressed a shaking hand to her forehead. Damn you, Derek. I said I'd talk to him, not this. Not like this. She dropped to her knees beside Lucas. Sweetheart, please. Give us the laptop. Let's just fix this. Thomas never has to know. We'll deal with it together. Lucas turned away, disgusted. You care about Thomas finding out? Your image? You ruined everything. And now you want me to protect you. Tears streamed down Monica's cheeks. I made a mistake, but... Tell him, Derek barked. Tell him everything. Because if Thomas sees that video, it's not just about you. It's about him, too. Or does Lucas still think Thomas is his real father? The air in the room froze. Lucas stared at Derek. What the hell are you talking about? Ethan's face was blank with shock. Monica went white. Derek, don't. Oh, I'm doing this, he said, eyes gleaming. Tell your son how you spent your nights while Thomas was deployed. You think you should only blame me or Ethan? Lucas's voice cracked. Mom. She shook her head, crying now. It was one night. I was alone. Thomas had just deployed to Afghanistan. I was scared, overwhelmed. I went to a bar, had too much to drink, and I slept with a stranger. It only happened once. Derek let out a bitter laugh. And that one night? Just happened to be right around when you got pregnant. You never told Thomas. Never told me. Lucas felt the world tilt beneath him. He had come here with fury. Now, all he felt was vertigo. Hell, I didn't even know about the one-night stand until you confessed. After Lucas was born, Derek spat, his voice filled with scorn. Lucas blinked hard, as if trying to clear a fog. Wait, you're saying there's a chance Dad isn't even my biological father? Monica's face crumpled. Her voice barely carried. I was never sure. I wanted it to be Thomas's. I told myself it was. But that doubt, it never left me. Lucas felt like the floor shifted beneath him. His hands curled into fists behind his back, his pulse hammering. You lied to both of us. My whole life. Tears streamed down Monica's face now. I didn't want to lose him. Then the affair with Derek happened and God, Lucas, it's all my fault. I didn't know how to stop. I didn't mean for you to get caught in the crossfire. Derek gave a humorless laugh. Too late for that, sweetheart. Shut up, Monica snapped, turning on him. You kidnapped my son, for God's sake. Lucas sat still, stunned into silence. The pain in his ribs flared with each breath, but it was distant compared to the ache splitting open inside his chest. The drip from a roof leak. The cold air seeping through the cracks in the cabin wall. The echo of his mother's confession. Everything he believed in, his family, his friendships, even his own identity, was unraveling right before him. Which was worse? That his mother had betrayed his father with Derek? That she had done the same with Ethan? Or that she may have lied about who his father truly was? And now, they were threatening him. A gun. Demands. Secrets exposed like open wounds. Ethan finally spoke, quietly. Dad, just let him go. He's not going anywhere, and he's hurt. Derek didn't look at him. He gives us the laptop, he walks out. Not before. Monica stepped in close, her voice hushed but full of menace. If Thomas finds out what you've done, he won't just be angry, he'll kill you. You know that. Derek's jaw tightened. His posture turned stiff, calculated. That's why we end this today. No video, no fallout. Lucas can't ruin us without proof. What none of them knew was that Thomas already suspected. The barbecue, Monica's distant behavior, her strange late-night texts, he had noticed everything. Without a word, he had planted a GPS tracker under her bumper. That morning, alone at home, Thomas checked the map. Her car was in the woods off any known trail. Thomas's heart sank. Without hesitation, he grabbed his Magnum, climbed into the SUV, and tore down the road like a man possessed. Rain spat at the windshield. His mind raced, dread pooling in his gut. He didn't know what he'd find, but he was prepared for war. At the end of the dirt path, Thomas saw the cabin. Then, a splintering crack. The front door burst inward, wood flying like shrapnel. Everyone inside froze. Lucas's heart leapt. Thomas Granger stood framed in the doorway, soaked, fierce, Magnum raised in both hands like he'd never left the battlefield. Get away from my son, he roared. Ethan jumped back, knocking over a chair. Monica gasped. Derek reached for his gun. But Thomas was faster. Boom. The Magnum exploded like thunder. A piece of ceiling shattered above Derek's head, sending dust and splinters raining down. Derek stumbled, dropping the pistol. Lucas let out a broken breath. Dad. Thomas advanced slowly, every inch the Marine he'd once been. His voice dropped. Lucas, are you hurt? My ribs, Lucas croaked. They cuffed me. Monica rushed forward. Thomas, please, don't do something you'll regret. Thomas's gaze locked on Ethan. Disgust contorted his features. You. Get away from him. Ethan's hands shot up. Mr. Granger, I'm sorry. I swear. Shut your mouth, Thomas snapped. He gestured to the gun on the floor. Kick it over. Nice and easy. Derek, dazed, used his foot to slide it across the floor. Lucas, Thomas said, I's never leaving Derek. I'm getting you out of here. Where's the key? Derek muttered. I have it. Then throw it. I'm not. Crack. Thomas struck Derek across the face with the barrel of the Magnum. The impact echoed. Blood splattered. Thomas. Monica screamed. Ethan staggered but didn't move. Dad. Derek collapsed, hand to his cheek, blood dripping between his fingers. Thomas towered over him. Where is the key? Derek reached shakily into his pocket, pulled out a small ring, and tossed it. Thomas bent to retrieve it, his weapon still trained. He crossed to Lucas, crouched, and unlocked the cuffs. Lucas sobbed as he rubbed his raw wrists. They wanted me to delete the video. Derek said. He said I might not even be your son. Thomas froze. His head turned slowly to Monica. His voice, when it came, was low and dangerous. Monica. What is he talking about? She covered her mouth. Thomas, I was going to tell you. I just didn't know how. We'll deal with that later, Thomas said tightly. Derek, bleeding, rose to one knee. Thomas, come on. Be reasonable. We can fix this. Like adults. Adults don't abduct kids. Thomas roared. Don't you ever talk to me about reason. Ethan took a step forward. Mr. Granger, I didn't want any of this. He forced me. Liar. Lucas shouted. You were right there. You didn't stop him. You just watched. Monica hovered near the door, paralyzed, guilt rolling off her in waves. You ruined everything, she whispered at Derek. Derek's eyes flared with desperation. You're the one who crawled into my bed, Monica, and then your sons. Don't pretend you're innocent in this. Monica's face crumpled. I made mistakes. Horrible ones. But this. She gestured to Lucas. This is beyond redemption. Thomas took one slow, deliberate step toward Derek. You threatened my boy. You held a gun on him. You broke into the life I built with violence and lies. The Magnum rose again, this time leveled directly at Derek's chest. And you're damn lucky I'm not pulling this trigger. You want to see how calm I am? Thomas growled, voice trembling with rage. You took my son hostage. You put a gun in his face. And now you've got the nerve to talk about my wife. Derek gritted his teeth, blood dripping steadily from the gash on his cheek. If that video gets out, it destroys both of our families, he snapped. People will see what Monica did. What Ethan did. What I did. Think about your precious reputation, Thomas. Thomas's laugh came low and cold. Reputation? You think I care about that now? All I care about is my son. His eyes turned to Ethan, seething. And you. Ethan's lip quivered. His voice was barely audible. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I love your wife. It wasn't planned. It just happened. Lucas surged forward with a snarl, but Thomas threw out an arm, holding him back. Lucas's voice cracked with fury. You're disgusting. Both of you. You used her. You used me. Monica staggered, her hand pressed to her forehead. This is a nightmare. Thomas wiped the sweat from his brow, his Magnum steady as stone. Lucas. Call the police. With trembling fingers, Lucas pulled out his phone. He dialed 911 and spoke into the receiver, breath shaky as he explained the kidnapping. The operator stayed on the line, calmly walking him through what to do next. Derek sneered. Cops? You'll regret this, Thomas. Thomas's shoulders squared, voice ironclad. The only thing I regret is ever thinking you were my friend. Behind them, Monica crumpled to her knees, sobbing into her hands. Ethan stood frozen, pale and motionless, eyes darting to every corner of the cabin like a panicked animal. The room hung heavy with silence. Every breath, every glance felt like it could detonate the fragile standoff. Lucas ended the call. His heart thundered. It's almost over, he thought. But the thought brought no comfort. Nothing ever would again. Outside, the wail of sirens grew louder. Then came the red and blue flicker through the grimy cabin windows. The unmistakable sound of boots in gravel. Police. Step out, or we'll breach. Thomas slowly lowered the magnum and raised his hands. Weapon down, he said calmly. I'm the father. My son was kidnapped. The front door flew open. Armed officers poured inside, weapons trained on every body. They secured Thomas's weapon and immediately placed Derek and Ethan in cuffs. Hands behind your back, on your knees. Lucas exhaled, chest heaving as two officers rushed to his side. He pointed toward the discarded cuffs. They tied me up. The van, it's outside. They kidnapped me. Another officer inspected his ribs under his shirt, frowning at the bruising. Visible trauma, he called out. Red marks on wrists, too. Lucas pulled up the messages from Ethan and handed over his phone. It's all there. The texts. The threats. Monica stood up slowly, tears streaking down her face. I came to help him. I didn't know what Derek planned. An officer led Derek outside, ignoring his curses and threats. This is a mistake. He's making it up. Ethan, equally restrained, stumbled out behind his father, muttering, I didn't want any of this. It was him. He made me do it. The police snapped photos of everything. Cuffs, bruises, the pistol on the floor, and the bullet hole in the ceiling. Another officer recovered the weapons. Thomas stood silently off to the side, arms crossed, shoulders rigid. Rage and relief battled on his face. Monica hovered nearby, eyes locked on the floor, too ashamed to speak. She wanted to reach out to Thomas, but the wall between them had grown too thick to cross. A detective approached. Lucas, Thomas, we'll need official statements from both of you. Lucas nodded. I'll say everything. They need to be locked up. Thomas gave a single nod of approval. He didn't say a word. Monica stepped forward. Officer, Derek threatened me too. I didn't plan any of this. I swear. I came here to protect my son. The detective raised a hand. We'll take your statement as well, ma'am. But you may want to speak with an attorney. If what you say is true, the investigation will clear you. Monica's head dipped. I understand. Thomas was allowed to leave after handing over the magnum for ballistics testing. The officer noted the ceiling bullet appeared to be a warning shot, not an attempt to harm. No charges were filed against Thomas for the weapon. Given the context of Lucas's abduction, it was deemed justified. Monica was questioned for hours, but ultimately released, both Thomas and Lucas confirming she had arrived to help, not to harm. The legal process crept forward, dragging the Granger family through public scrutiny. Derek was charged with kidnapping, assault, and unlawful use of a firearm. Ethan was named as an accomplice. Bail was set high. Derek postured and promised he'd be out soon. But his assets were frozen, tied up in real estate, litigation, and whispers of bankruptcy. He stayed in jail. Ethan, crying in court, was granted lower bail, but no one posted it. Not even Monica. Lucas, meanwhile, became the center of local gossip. He gave a detailed statement to the prosecutor. So did Monica, admitting to the affair, the text messages, and her ignorance of the kidnapping plan. The story swept through the town like wildfire. A father and son sharing a mistress. A teenage boy discovering a video of his mother with his best friend. A kidnapping. A rescue. The media ran with it, twisting every detail, feeding the public's morbid fascination. Public sympathy was with Thomas and Lucas. Monica couldn't walk into a grocery store without feeling the heat of judgmental eyes. Her reputation, like everything else in her life, lay in ruins. Thomas's rage toward her didn't explode. It festered. Quiet. Cold. Deadly. He stopped sleeping beside her. Some nights he disappeared entirely, sleeping at a motel or in the guest room behind a locked door. She pleaded for a conversation. Thomas refused. 2 weeks after the incident, she stood outside his study and slipped a note beneath the door. Her handwriting trembled. It was one night, Thomas. A stranger in a bar. I was scared you wouldn't come home from war. I hate myself for it. I'm sorry. Hours later, Thomas opened the door. His eyes were bloodshot. His expression hollow. He looked at her like she was a stranger. If Lucas is not my son, he said, voice flat and raw, I need to know. She exhaled slowly, defeated. Then we'll do the test. At a discreet clinic in town, the saliva swab was taken. Lucas sat numbly, not resisting as the nurse scraped the inside of his cheek. He didn't speak to Monica. She tried to meet his eyes, but he kept his gaze fixed on the sterile floor. Shame and regret churned inside her, but the weight of consequences was now far heavier than any apology she could offer. When the DNA results arrived, Thomas sat alone in the living room, the envelope tight in his grip. Lucas sat across from him, tense and quiet, arms clasped together as though holding himself in place. Monica stood a few feet away, pale, trembling, tears tracking down her cheeks. Thomas tore the seal, pulled out the paper, and stared at it. Probability of paternity, 0%. His hands trembled. Lucas held his breath. "You're not." Thomas's voice cracked, barely more than a whisper. "You're not my biological son." Lucas's shoulders slumped. He closed his eyes as hot tears spilled down his face. "You raised me, Dad. That's all that ever mattered." Monica's hands covered her mouth. Thomas crumpled the results in one hand, eyes hollowed out in disbelief. After everything, after war, deployments, trauma, this moment hit him harder than anything he'd ever endured in combat. "All those years," he murmured, his voice like sandpaper. "You let me believe." Monica stepped forward. "Thomas, don't," he snapped, recoiling. Lucas rose and moved to his side. "You taught me everything that counts. How to be strong. How to be decent. You're my dad always." Something inside Thomas broke. He pulled Lucas into a fierce hug, burying his face in his son's shoulder. They both shook with silent sobs, clinging to the only truth left between them. Monica stood frozen, watching the scene with silent devastation. The damage was done. Days later, Thomas filed for divorce. The documents were cold, final. No room for therapy. No space for second chances. Monica begged for a conversation, for a chance to explain, but Thomas refused. The kidnapping had torn open the wound, and the paternity test buried any hope of healing it. Meanwhile, Derek and Ethan sat in jail, awaiting trial. Their defense attorneys attempted to twist the narrative, claiming Derek never meant harm, suggesting Lucas had escalated the confrontation, but the facts were undeniable. The bruises on Lucas's body, the footage, and Ethan's damning text messages left no room for doubt. 6 months later, in a courtroom packed with media and spectators, Derek Lawson was sentenced to 10 years in prison for kidnapping, unlawful restraint, and assault with a deadly weapon. Ethan, younger and less hardened, received 3 years in a youth facility. The judge cited his age, but made it clear that his betrayal of Lucas carried lasting weight. Local and regional headlines devoured the story. A father and son entangled in an affair with the same woman. A mother exposed. A kidnapping. Betrayal stacked upon betrayal. It was sensational and tragic. 2 families gutted by lust, lies, and recklessness. During the trial, Monica sat quietly in the back, wrapped in a scarf and dark glasses, hoping to disappear. She testified honestly about the affair, admitted to lying to Thomas, and denied knowing about Derek's plan. Thomas backed up her claim. Investigators agreed she hadn't been part of the conspiracy and had, in fact, tried to de-escalate things. But public scorn didn't care about legal absolution. Once the verdicts were in, Monica packed what little remained of her dignity and moved in with a cousin 2 states away. The home she once shared with Thomas and Lucas went on the market. She left behind whispers, judgment, and a name that would never again carry respect. Thomas, for his part, resigned from Granger Security Consulting. The fallout had cost him major clients. But beyond that, the passion was gone. He had no energy left for high-stakes negotiations or tactical briefings. His battlefield now was personal. Lucas moved in with Thomas into a modest townhouse on the outskirts of Richmond. Together, they built something new. One evening, they burned the DNA results in a backyard fire pit. The paper blackened, curled, and disappeared into smoke. "It's over," Thomas said, watching the last ash drift away. Lucas stood beside him, arms folded. "Yeah," he said softly. "It's over. Healing, though, would take time." Lucas changed his college major to criminal justice, determined to understand the systems that had nearly failed him. Thomas found part-time work with a smaller, quieter firm. The days were slower, less complicated. He didn't mind. Monica called a few times. Tearful voicemails. Apologies. Asking how Lucas was. Lucas answered once. Told her he was alive, doing okay, but needed space. Thomas never returned her calls. Not once. The sound of her voice had become unbearable. Rumor had it Monica was working part-time at a coffee shop, barely staying afloat. The community that once smiled at her now turned away. Her fall was quiet, but complete. Derek remained in prison, his reputation destroyed. Ethan would serve his time, but he'd carry a stain that never faded. And yet, through the ashes, Thomas and Lucas forged something new. They settled into their rhythms. Mornings brought quiet coffee and mundane chats about weather, errands, football. But sometimes, their talks went deeper. About loyalty, boundaries, regret. Some nights, Thomas would wake from dreams of gunfire, or worse, that cabin. On those nights, he'd find Lucas awake in the living room, textbooks spread before him under the lamplight. They'd share a look. No words needed. No longer tied by blood, but by trust, by choice. Something harder to break. Their old life was shattered, but in the fragments, they found each other again. Their story, whispered in their old neighborhood, became a grim cautionary tale. A reminder that secrets rot in silence, and betrayal can grow in even the most well-tended homes. But it also became a testament to resilience. Thomas and Lucas didn't pretend nothing happened. They carried the scars, bore the shame, but they didn't let it define them. And in the end, they walked forward, not unscathed, but unbroken.